Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I want to be clear that I take no pleasure in spending the opening of yet another Dutton Ranch breakdown talking about Carter. It is not how I imagined spending my Thursday. It is not what I signed up for when this show premiered and promised us a story about Beth and Rip building something in Texas and the formidable family standing in their way. And yet here we are, 8 episodes in, and a genuinely significant chunk of Whiskey Limits is devoted to a teenager being hungover, forgetting to close a gate, falling off a horse, storming off in a sulk, and then asking Sheriff Wade, a man who has made his distaste for Carter abundantly clear on multiple occasions, for a job. A job with the sheriff, who hates him. We'll get there. We'll also get to the actually important stuff because there is genuinely important stuff in this episode, Austin's revelation chief among them. But I think we need to process Carter first, as a community, before we can move on with our lives. So the episode opens in the immediate aftermath of last week's chaos. Beulah is being airlifted to the hospital, and the confirmation arrives fairly quickly that she's going to be fine. Alive, at any rate, which is the right call narratively. Annette Bening is too good, and Beulah is too important to the season's final stretch to lose her now. But it does mean that the question of consequences for Carter becomes considerably less urgent than it felt heading into this episode. Rip leads Carter home on horseback. And in fairness to Rip, he handles it the way you'd expect. Stern, no nonsense. A man who has killed people for showing considerably less disrespect than Carter showed last night, and is somehow finding the patience to just put the kid back in the saddle when he falls off. Carter also vomits. On the horse. This is the level of dignity we are working with. The following morning, Beth sits with him on the porch and has what I can only describe as an unreasonably gentle conversation for someone whose relationship with their employer just got torched by this child's drunk antics. Carter admits he hasn't been attending school. He says his real ambition is to be a cowboy like Rip. And Beth, instead of delivering the response this situation arguably deserves, gives him a job. Just like that. A job. Ibuprofen and a heart-to-heart, and we're done. No consequences. No reckoning. No meaningful acknowledgement that he nearly caused a woman to die at her own party. The fans have been vocal about Carter all season, and I've made no secret of where I stand. And this episode does absolutely nothing to address the legitimate grievances anyone has about how much real estate he's occupying in a story that has considerably more interesting people in it. What follows is a working day that goes about as well as you'd expect. Carter is relentlessly ribbed about his hangover by everyone within range, which is well-earned, even. But then he forgets to lock a gate. A cow gets out. He tries to rope it, falls off his horse in the attempt, and rather than absorbing this as the natural consequence of being very new at a job he just acquired this morning, he storms off, just walks away from the work. In a huff, he gets home and is genuinely, aggressively rude to Rip, who responds with more patience than the situation has any right to receive. And then Beth, who should by any reasonable measure be the one person on earth who would not coddle Carter through his own attitude problem, sides with him anyway. I understand that Beth and Rip love this kid. That's been established. But there is a version of this show where Carter's dysfunction has actual teeth, where the people responsible for him hold him to a standard that reflects the seriousness of the world he's been inserted into. And Dutton Ranch keeps choosing a different version. The one where we're gently invited to understand him rather than watch him face the music. He ends the day going to Dwight's place to sit with his feelings, which is fine. At least he's not at a party with access to taxidermied longhorns. And then Sheriff Wade shows up at Dwight's, and Carter asks him for a job. I've watched this scene twice now. I've thought about it carefully. I cannot construct a reading of it that makes it feel like a logical thing for Carter to do. Wade has been using this boy as a witness he needs to keep quiet about a murder. Their relationship is built entirely on coercion. Carter asking Wade for employment is either the show doing something very deliberate that I'm not yet able to see, some long play that'll make sense in the finale, or it is simply a strange piece of writing that got through to screen without anyone flagging how completely out of left field it lands. Either way, Wade turns him down, which is the correct decision, and the scene ends without resolving anything. If there's a payoff coming for this beat, it needs to arrive in episode 9. Because right now it just sits there, baffling. On to the parts of the episode that actually work. Beulah, post-surgery and apparently possessed of a constitution that makes cardiac events a moderate inconvenience rather than a near-death experience, receives visitors with the air of a woman holding court from a temporary inconvenience. The first through the door are Will and Joaquin, and the conversation she has with them is the most honest she's been all season. Her justification for handing things to Will is essentially, it doesn't really matter who holds the title because Beth and Rip are running the operation anyway, which is either a completely transparent attempt to manage two sons who want to kill each other, or the most efficient summary of the actual power structure at 10 Petal that anyone has articulated yet. Possibly both simultaneously. Beth arrives next, with flowers and a very reasonable set of concerns about what working under Will's banner is going to mean for her and Rip in practice. It's a good scene, because it's two women who respect each other in the way you respect a worthy opponent, not warmly, exactly, but with a kind of professional acknowledgement that the other person is not to be underestimated. Beth is not thrilled about the new arrangement. Beulah is not particularly interested in Beth's feelings about it. Both of them understand the situation clearly. The conversation ends without resolution because there isn't one available yet. And then Everett walks in and tells Beulah that watching her nearly die has clarified his feelings for her, and that he'd like to take his final ride alongside her, which is the most Sheridan way imaginable of a man in his 70s declaring romantic intent. Beulah is visibly moved, which is a genuinely lovely moment for Annette Bening to play, and then she immediately uses his declaration as leverage to get him to help her discharge herself from the hospital early, which is very Beulah, and I mean that as a compliment. Here is where Episode 8 earns its place in the season, because Austin Lewis has apparently decided that the safest response to working at a ranch with an illegal operation is to tell someone about it, which is either brave or catastrophic, depending on how the next episode goes. He nearly shoots Miguel earlier in the day, not accidentally, but in the specific, controlled way of a man who is this close to a breaking point and just barely pulls back, and then goes looking for someone he can actually trust. He finds Zach at a bar, asks whether he can rely on Zach and Rip, gets the kind of assurance that probably shouldn't inspire as much confidence as it apparently does, and then tells him everything. And what he tells him is significant. The 10 Petal has been running an illegal cattle smuggling operation out of Mexico. That's the actual business underneath the ranching business. That's how they've kept the lights on despite an operation that, by any visible measure, shouldn't be financially viable. And Wes, whose disappearance has been the thread running under this entire season, got too close to the truth and was killed for it. Every piece of this fits. The body Rip found. Joaquin's explanation about Wes being a dealer, which always felt like it was leaving something out. The way Beulah has structured her operation so that the people inside it only ever see one layer of it at a time. This is the answer the show has been building toward, and it lands cleanly. The question now is what Rip does with it. Because if Austin is right, and I think he is, then Beth and Rip haven't just gone to work for a difficult family. They've embedded themselves inside a criminal operation, and the liability that creates is enormous. The episode's final significant beat belongs to Joaquin, who is having what is genuinely one of the worst weeks of his life. Passed over for an inheritance he was explicitly promised. Watching someone he knows commit a murder and hand the sheriff a weapon without producing enough to actually do anything with it. Wade, for his part, does not seem remotely energized by receiving a murder weapon without a body to attach it to. He takes it and essentially moves on. Joaquin, alone and out of legitimate options, screams, and I mean that literally, just screams into the night, which is a very specific kind of desperation, and then places a call to Mariano, his biological father, the fugitive who crossed the border 40-odd years ago and has been operating in some capacity we still don't fully understand ever since. What kind of help Mariano can actually provide is the question the season is leaving open heading into the finale. But given everything we learned in Episode 7 about who Mariano is and what he's capable of, and given the strong implication that decades of operating outside the law may have put him in a position of considerable power, the answer could involve a type of intervention that changes everything about the final hour. Whiskey Limits is an uneven episode. There's no dressing that up. Carter's storyline continues to consume more oxygen than it produces drama, and the hospital sequences, while well-performed, don't do a great deal to accelerate the season toward its conclusion. But Austin's revelation is genuinely important. It reframes the entire season's mystery in a way that feels earned rather than convenient. And Joaquin calling Mariano is exactly the kind of move that a finale needs in place before it can detonate properly. One episode left. Beulah is out of hospital and Will is nominally in charge. Rip now has information about Ten Petal's actual business model that he absolutely cannot pretend he doesn't have. Carter is still carrying the burden of Dwight's murder. And somewhere south of the border, Mariano just picked up the phone. The question I'll leave you with is the one the whole season has been building to. When everything finally breaks open in that finale, and it will, Beulah ends up on the same side as Beth and Rip, or does she go down with the operation she spent her life building? See you for the finale.